And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners Board work session on traffic impact fees. It is June 10th, 2020. I'm John Hutchings, the chair of the board. Also present is Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser and Commissioner Gary Edwards and County Manager Ramiro Chavez. And we have also with us the Public Works Director, Jennifer Walker. And Jennifer, would you please introduce all the other folks I see and don't see?
Yes, actually, I'm going to kick that over to Scott, Lindblom, or Matt to do introductions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. So we have myself, Scott Lindblom, the county engineer. In the same room with me, in the other masked figure is Matt Unzelman, our county traffic engineer. On the line remotely are Daniel Dye and Kendra Braylon. They're our consultants that helped us out with this update of the traffic impact fees. They're from a firm called Fair & Piers. And in addition, I see Karen Weiss and Teresa Parsons on the line too from Public Works.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to interrupt again because I forgot to give the phone number out. But if anybody in the public wants to join in, not join in, but join in by listening, there's a conference call. You can join it by dialing 360-252-9020, and your PIN number is 1234. Thank you.
Okay, are we all set?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So again, thank you for your time this afternoon. Today we're going to do two things. First, we're going to present to you the draft traffic impact fee program. And then secondly, we're going to present to you the annual transportation impact fee report to the board as required by Thurston County Code 2504-100. And in the end, we'll be looking for your direction on how you would like us to proceed on the traffic impact fees. So just as a brief set of background, the county roads primarily are funded by the road levy, the property tax, and the gas tax. Our capital program funded by local money, and which we use to leverage grants, whether state, federal, typically state or federal grants. This is the part of the program that we use to prepare for growth, the capital program. As many other parts of the county and many other counties are facing throughout the nation, due to COVID, we do expect a decrease in our revenue, in large part due to the decrease in gas tax revenue. And also with over $4 million of revenue diverted or shifted to general fund for other government purchases, certainly legal and within the board's authority to do that and going toward important county needs, these have a significant impact on our ability to fund needed preservation, maintenance, and also our ability to fund capital improvements.
Hey, Scott, do you want to share your screen so we can see the PowerPoint?
I think we are.
No.
No.
Oh, what? We'll work through that. What I'm saying right now is just not on the screen. It's just kind of the intro. So, and I'm almost done. So it's these capital improvements that we use to pay for growth. And as you heard in the previous part,
okay, it's right there. Okay, got it.
Got it. The growth is coming, and the impact fees are one of the tools we have to help us prepare for that growth. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Daniel from Fair & Piers, and he's going to kind of walk you through the study and how we got to where we are today.
But before Daniel starts, are you guys seeing my cursor right now?
Yeah, why don't you make it a full screen, Matt?
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. You're looking at the other screen.
Oh, they're looking at that screen. Yeah.
No, make it a full screen on your PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm on a dual screen, so I got to do it this way. You got it?
No. There you go.
Oh, good. Okay, Daniel.
Great. So Matt, if you'll go right back up to the top. So just real quick, nice to meet you all. Thank you, commissioners, for being here. Wanted to present real quick on impact fees on the transportation side. And I'm going to try and not repeat any of the things that Jason did. There are a lot of similarities between impact fee programs, between parks and transportation. There's also a lot of nuances, so we'll go over some of those. As we go through, we'll talk a little bit about the projects, process, and rates that we get into for the transportation update. Matt will go over some of the next steps, and then Matt will present on some of the options for the rates coming out of the study, and then we'll provide the 2019 impact fee report. Next slide, please. So as Jason was saying, impact fees are really one-time charges paid for by new development with the idea that growth should pay for growth. These have been collected on the transportation side, just like on the park side since 2013, and they're fairly common amongst jurisdictions. These are something that developers are used to, and it actually provides a lot of certainty for developers where they can go and look on the county's website and know exactly what their impact fees are going to be based on what they're developing.
So I think
wait on that to get.
That's fine. Just you can take it.
Next slide when you get a chance. So again, as Jason was saying, it only pays for capital system improvements. It doesn't pay for your ongoing maintenance and operation, and it really pays for things that are needed for growth. So kind of examples of things that impact fees would not pay for are pavement overlays or where you're fixing bad pavement. What it could pay for is new traffic signals, new roundabouts, roadway widening, and things of that nature. Impact fees also can't pay for existing deficiencies. So unlike in parks, we can obviously have transportation systems that are not meeting their adopted level of service standards. So people are having to wait longer than we would deem acceptable. Impact fees cannot be charged for those deficiencies, and we'll get into a little bit of how we reduce those. And impact fees on the next slide are very common in Western Washington. Here's just a sampling of some of the cities and counties that charge them. So as we were saying earlier, it's very business as usual for developers. They're expecting these fees. They're used to these fees. They've been paying these fees for, in some cases, five to 10 years, in some cases all the way back since the Growth Management Act started in 1998. So these are not anything new for them. Next slide, please. So how are impact fees charged? Again, as with parks impact fees, they're only charged on new development. So anytime that someone sells a house that is already existing, that's not a case where impact fees are charged. It's only when new building permits are created. And this gets a little bit into the wonky side of things on this slide, but essentially we set a rate, just as Jason does, we set a rate per PM peak hour trip. So essentially a home is estimated to generate about one trip. So if you think about if you're going home this evening, you're probably one trip into your house. That is how we actually charge rates. So the fee rate that we're going to show you at the end is somewhat similar to what people would actually be charged, but it's a little different because of some adjustment factors. So for instance, if we were to set a rate at $3,500 for a single family home, that would end up with the adjustments being a little bit lower at $3,200. And for that same rate of $3,500 per trip, that would be about $19,000 for a sit-down, for a small sit-down restaurant. So it kind of just depends on how many trips we're expected to make per unit of development. This slide just provides a little bit of a comparison between rates across the or across Western Washington. You can see Lacey's a little bit lower, Tumwater and Olympia are a little bit higher. Kitsap County and Pierce County, I want to just touch on briefly. Kitsap County is about to update their rates. They're in the process of that right now, and they've gotten feedback in the same direction as the commissioner was speaking about earlier, where the rates are really low in the county, and so that's forcing the city jurisdictions in Kitsap County are not too happy with that, because that is causing more development in the rural county. Pierce County, I believe, is also updating theirs. Snohomish County is pretty much on par with the current Thurston County rates that are shown there on the right. So these things are always a little bit in flux. Different jurisdictions update them kind of on a rolling basis every 6 to 8 years, I'd say is common, but they do kind of change around over time. Next slide, please. So really what we start with when we're putting together an impact fee program, or in this case, updating the existing impact fee program, is we look at the proposed project list. So these are kind of the identified projects that we think are needed to help accommodate that growth over the next 20 years. So that comes from the transportation improvement plan that's updated every year for the next 6 years. That comes from the 20-year comp plan. That also comes from county staff saying, hey, we realize that we don't have a project in this area. We're already seeing that we're close to having some concurrency issues. We're gonna need to do something to increase capacity there. And that's how we come up with the kind of overall universe of projects that we could charge for. We came up with 39 total projects, and this list is still being refined a little bit, and that comes with a $255 million total cost over the next 20 years. And again, like Jason was saying, it will need to be included on the capital facilities element, so that's just part of your comp plan amendments each year that we'll need to have in place before we start charging. On this slide, I don't expect you to be able to see individual numbers or anything. If you could go back up to the map. So essentially, this just shows you where throughout the county, anywhere you see one of those little black dots or one of those black lines, that's where we have a project in each of the areas. And things kind of are not entirely evenly spread out. You'll see there's a lot kind of in the central UGAs around Olympia, Tumwater, and Allocation. Those are the places that we expect to grow a lot more as they're kind of targeted for growth. The same thing down in the Grand Mound UGA as well. So once we have that project list on the next slide, this is kind of the flowchart of how we go about taking that eligible project list, so only taking those capacity projects and then bringing it down through the process to get to a cost per trip. So we start with that eligible project list, and then we strip out anything that's due to an existing deficiency, anything that's operations and maintenance, anything that's kind of not related to growth purely. And we separate that out on the gray side there on the right. That leaves us with kind of the portion of that project list that's related to new growth. The next thing that we need to do is separate out growth outside of unincorporated counties. So in this case, that means any growth that's happening within the city limits, within state and federal lands, or anything that's happening, any trips that are being generated outside of the county. So if someone commutes from Tacoma to somewhere in Centralia, they don't count as growth in the county, even though they're using county roads and using the transportation infrastructure. We can't charge them under the Growth Management Act for those things. So once we get just that growth in the unincorporated county, that leaves us with the eligible impact fee cost. So you can see at each step here, we've kind of taken bits and pieces away so that we're not charging as much money to developers. One of the things that we did in that chart is we take out the existing deficiencies, and we don't need to talk about these too specifically, but just these are places where that we're already failing concurrency, where that we already have an existing level of service issue. And this is just a calculation that says, okay, for this Meridian and Mullen Road, we can't charge developers for our existing problems. We can only charge them for the capacity that's going to be added over and above what we need to fix that problem. And so that's where this pie chart breaks down. Next slide, please. In the cost allocation, so this is that same flow chart, just with some numbers behind it now. So we go from that $255 million, we strip out things like previous impact fee collections, committed funds, existing deficiencies. That's $43 million off the top that we've just taken out of the impact fee program. We then further take out the things for that incorporated and external growth. So that's another $114 million. And that leaves us with about $98.5 million that is reasonably related to development that we need to fund somehow in order to keep up with the capacity needed to accommodate all of that new growth and all of those new residents and businesses. Next slide, please. So when we think about a county, for cities, it's very easy. We often charge for smaller cities. We charge one rate across the entire county or across the entire city because everybody that lives in a smaller city is probably going to use transportation, the transportation network throughout the city somewhat evenly. In the case of a county, that's not really the case. So we know that people that are kind of commuting between Olympia and Grand Mound are probably not going to go into the east area of the county very often, or we know that people that live in Yelm are probably not going to go into the northwest area very often. So if we go down to the next slide, we have an example of how we do that proportionate share across the different across the different projects. So this is an example project that we kind of pulled out some graphics for Marvin and Mullen Road. So it's kind of over there on the east side of Lacey's UGA. It's a very popular intersection that needs to be expanded to account for some growth in that area. And so what we did is we use a travel demand model created by the Thurston Regional Planning Council, and we do some calculations to say where are the trips that are traveling through this project, where are they coming to and coming to and from. So as you can see there, as expected, a lot of the people are kind of staying right there within that central UGA area. That's that 40% there in the middle. A lot of them, 26%, are going into the Tri-Cities area of Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey. And then 17% are going external. And then you can see on the kind of outer ring of, if you take a bigger circle, you can see there's a lot less people going down into the south area that are using that intersection. And we use those calculations, and there's a lot of spreadsheet math in the background that helps us determine what is the proportional share of these projects that you should be paying for where you're developing. So someone in the northwest area is not going to pay very much. They may pay 1% of a project over at Marvin and Mullen Road versus people in the central UGA are going to pay 40% or so. Next slide, please. So with that, we come up with what's called the maximum defensible cost per trip end, and these are very high. This is saying, okay, of this 20-year project list, these are all of the things that we could conceivably charge to developers. This is not necessarily saying this is what you have to charge to developers. This is just the upper limit, as we were talking about earlier. And it kind of varies based on the service area. So in the northwest area in particular, for instance, there's a pretty high fee per trip end because we're not seeing a lot of growth. Even though there's not a large amount of projects in that area money-wise, there's not as much growth in that area, so it's divided out by a smaller number, and so you get a higher fee per trip. And I do want to point out that we are kind of still making some edits and tweaks to the project list, so these might change around a little bit as we refine those with county staff. One thing that we did want to compare is kind of, it's pretty common in transportation impact fee programs that a lot of jurisdictions don't necessarily implement that top rate, that maximum defensible rate. There's no one set percentage that people have to use. There's no state guidance on what that reduction could be if you decided to reduce it at a policy level. But we see that 50% is one of the reductions that some communities are using. So this slide just kind of compares in orange the updated rate if we were to take a 50% reduction by service area. So that leads to kind of an average between all of them of about $3,600 per trip versus the existing rate of $3,100. Here is kind of a comparison to the neighbors using those maximum defensible over there on the tall column to the right, and then the 50% reduction. So you're kind of right in line with Tumwater and Olympia. You're a little bit higher than Lacey. You're a little bit higher than, as I said, Kitsap and Pierce County are increasing their rates as we speak. They're working on updates to those rates. So those may come up some. So it's kind of gives you, you're kind of in the right ballpark for some of the jurisdictions that you have within the county, within Tumwater and Olympia. With that, kind of the next steps, and then I'll turn it back over to Matt. So kind of today is the board briefing, just to let you know what we've done so far and kind of provide a little bit of information on what we could do going forward. After today, we'll need direction from the board. And again, I'll turn that over to Jennifer or Matt to talk about when when that direction needs to come. I suspect it's probably similar to the parks impact fee. And then we'll need to make sure that anything new on the project list is added to the capital facilities element before board adoption. With that, I will turn it over to Matt to talk through some of those options.
Thank you, Daniel. Nicely done. In your briefing packet, you'll see that we've laid out 3 different options for the Board of County Commissioners for consideration. Before we dive into these options, I want to reemphasize something that Scott said in the intro, that traffic impact fees are necessary for the county to meet growth management requirements. And when Scott and I were reaching out to the Olympia Master Builders earlier this week, that's one of the messages that we conveyed, is that we do need these traffic impact fees to meet transportation growth management acts in the county, so that development continue. And a good example of this, as you guys are very well aware of, is the Marvin Road project. Without impact fee money to address the concurrency issues out there, development will no longer be able to continue. But fortunately, we're figuring that out. So option 1 was that with that graphic that Daniel showed earlier that had those maximum rates. So it equates to about $6,700 per new single family construction house constructed. This option, the pro is that this option provides Public Works with the most amount of impact money to help fully support funding for transportation capacity projects within the county. The con for this option is that this is really a significant impact to the developer, and that cost could even get passed on to home buyers as well. The other thing that kind of jumped out at staff when evaluating these options is that this rate would be significantly higher than the rates of any of the other jurisdictions in Thurston County. So option 2 is to maintain what we're doing now. Currently, traffic impact fee rates in Thurston County are reduced by 50%. This option provides much less impact to developers. It equates to about, what's that say, $3,300 per new single family home construction. Average excuse me, I can't talk in this mess. Spread throughout the county. And this rate would be more in line and more consistent with what other agencies in Thurston County are charging developers. And then the third option is to set up an additional briefing later this year. The advantage for the county commissioners is that this would give you some time to further consider these methods. The disadvantage is that before the comp plan update, we'd have less time to work with groups such as the Olympia Master Builders or other constituents on what the board's direction is going to be in regards to charging impact fees. So with that, I'd like to pause and ask if the Board of County Commissioners has any questions regarding these 3 alternatives.
Commissioner Edwards, I'll start with you, sir.
The only thing I might ask is,
He has none.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
okay. Was there any consideration of this new phenomena that we're living in as far as the new reality of post-COVID-19, where there's going to be a potential flight from urban America to rural America, and then those folks are, or maybe the suburbs, those folks are going to be working from home that can work from home, and thus there's going to be less trips? Or are you guys even talking about that, or has it even come up?
This is Kendra Breland with Fair and Peers as well. I'll start that, and if anybody else would like to jump in, they're more than welcome to. That is a very insightful question. To be candid with this group, much of the work that we've done on this actually predated kind of March 2020. So COVID was not in our expectations. So I want to be clear about that. And that is something that we can talk with the county about, certainly, and looking at kind of how does COVID-19, if there are kind of continuing effects of the pandemic and folks' residential preferences. What I would respond to the commissioner on is that I think you've raised a really good point that people like living in rural America. And if you are going out and suburban areas, if you have fewer commute trips, less necessity to be driving into places like Tacoma and Seattle, you may have more of a general preference for living in Thurston County. I'm not a real estate economist, but I would say to the extent that there is growth that's occurring within Thurston County, that having this sort of fee in place would help you deliver the infrastructure that I think county staff has really demonstrated to us is necessary to facilitate comfortable and safe mobility as you grow over time. The last piece of that the commissioner has asked is just about commute trips. And of course, we don't exactly know where that's going to go. But I would say that the majority of travel that occurs on a roadway system today, even prior to COVID-19, is non-work travel. And what I would say is one trend we are seeing is people are working more and more at home. They're actually doing a lot more discretionary travel. So yes, the impacts feel a little bit different, but they are still occurring on our roadway networks. So I think it does still support the idea that you need to continue to facilitate building out your system over time.
Ty, may I jump in on Gary's question? Thank you. It was mentioned that we've suffered revenue losses because of COVID, because of the fuel tax decrease in revenue, and more people are telecommuting, which goes right into what you were just saying, Kendra. Fewer trips, and with the increase in fuel economy and electric cars and such, we're going to continue to not suffer, but realize the revenue loss. But how does that play in, or how does the WSDOT's pay per mile factor in this? Is there a revenue share on that in that scheme?
I think that is still being worked out. I would presume that there would be a revenue share with counties. I think that's one we might want to follow up with you on, because I'm not totally in on kind of how that revenue situation is working. But I think the intention is at some point that may replace or supplement the fuel tax, and to the extent that it's doing that, there should be a local share. What I would say is that impact fees are meant to be a funding source that complements those. And again, it is leveraged on new development. So when you're building a new household or you're adding more commercial space, it's a one-time charge. So it's not something that is charged year after year after year, and it is just on new development. So really just trying to make sure the growth is paying its way. We recognize that existing users are funding your system through gas taxes, through sales taxes that they're paying, and eventually through that per mile fee. So this is just another way to pay for your transportation system, again, without impacting so much existing county users.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if Ty, if you have any more information on that or not from TRPC, but you can go now.
I guess the thing I'm trying to struggle with, and it's good to sort of see these park and traffic back to back, because they're a little different. I'm trying to figure out the differences in the way that I should look at them. I'm 100% in favor of charging the amount necessary for the projects that are going to happen, but you're kind of looking into the future and not knowing. I'm sort of troubled, not troubled, but a little concerned by the fact that the calculation for the traffic impact fee, at least of the maximum, is tied to this project list, which just seems like what's the mooring on that? I mean, you could throw, like with parks, it seems like the parks is more constrained because you've got properties, and we know we have extreme limitations on M&O, and that's a disincentive to load up a capital list of projects. But with roads, it seems like there's no end to the number of improvements and things that you could speculate about needing over 20 years. Like, I keep coming back to there's one identified right next to my house, and it's a roundabout, and I can't imagine ever having a roundabout right there next to my house. There is no impact on that intersection, and you're saying there's no growth in that area in the Northwest. So I'm not sure why that's even on the list. I questioned that last year, but if something like that is the basis for calculating what the possible impact fee that you could charge people is, then I look at this list probably quite a bit differently than the park one. So in one sense, I was kind of more thinking, especially looking at what other jurisdictions are doing, I was kind of thinking that maybe we keep we'd want to keep them the same at the 50%. Then Commissioner Edwards comes in with the whole rural flight thing, and then that's a good argument to increase the fees, because you certainly don't want, that means you're going to have increasing infrastructure needs, and you're going to have things in conflict with growth management and all sorts of environmental policies. So I don't know, I guess it's a difficult question, but I wanted to articulate what I was seeing, what I was observing in terms of park versus roads, because if I'm off base on that, I'd like somebody to kind of set me straight.
Commissioner Menzer, so the Thurston County Regional Planning Council, TRPC, they what we're using to generate our project list is they hold the model for the traffic model for this region. So they're looking at all the land use, and then based upon those land use, they're projecting the traffic volumes to a forecasted year of 2040. So a lot of the projects that are on that project list, they're looking ahead to the forecasted 2040 to make sure that we can meet the growth management criteria.
And I trust that, we have TRPC. I mean, I work a little bit with the neighboring jurisdictions in my role as commissioner, and I think TRPC is a resource that no other county that is around us has. I'm just thinking about, I'm not so much thinking, I'm thinking more theoretically, like if we were just some little county that didn't have the resources, didn't have TRPC, was just kind of speculating without a lot of data and resource power, or was unethical and wanted to pump up the number of impact fees they could charge. Like, you could load up that list in theory, right? I mean, what's to stop you from trying to artificially inflate the maximum amount of impact fees you could charge by over guesstimating what your capacity needs are going to be or growth needs are going to be. I agree with Matt. We have tons of awesome resources in Thurston, and I'm sure that the things in that project list are well founded. But I'm just trying to think about the way these methodologies are being presented, because I've never really thought about them at this level.
I think one of the things that I would add that roads does share with parks is that we are still financially constrained as well, because everything that we build, we do have to maintain as well, and we're not, generally getting, so we share that. Those two programs, those two systems share that.
Are we still got a mic open?
Commissioner Menz or Gary Edwards, you got questions, I'm sure?
Yes, I think that's what we did years ago, is stack those rates up to discourage growth. And I think that's why we're charging twice as much as any of our neighbors to discourage that type of growth. So, I mean, it can work either way. And I guess I'd like to know the answer to that from staff. How long ago did we double our rates compared to any other surrounding jurisdictions?
Just go back to 2012, Jennifer.
I thought Matt said we were charging the 50%. We weren't.
We are and that's where I'm getting at is we're charging 50% right now. We've been doing that since we began collecting fees in 2013, and it was made. The decision was made at that time to do a 50% reduction.
Oh,
That next to last bar there is just theoretical max. That's not what we've ever charged, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
Okay.
good, that clarifies that.
Yeah, Matt,
Yeah,
can you go up 2 more slides real quick?
that got me
might be
too.
Oh, 1 more. Maybe a few more. Back to
I
the
see.
bar chart before that is the one that you want to compare.
Okay. that makes
There we go.
sense.
So
Right.
this slide shows the current rates as they are adopted right
Yeah.
now as people are being charged at the counter today.
My mistake.
Okay.
So as we were talking about, that 50% reduction that we're talking about, that's option 2 in your packet.
Okay. Got it.
Any other questions, Gary?
No, sir.
Ty? No. Daniel, I keep looking at the sign above your head. I keep thinking you have a question.
Nope, just a speed limit sign and a pedestrian sign.
Yeah. Jennifer, anything else to wrap up?
I still got one more slide.
Oh, go ahead.
So
Oh, there we go.
I'll go quick because this is the only thing keeping us from.
Oh, we're not in a hurry, Matt. You got time.
Good. All right. So as we're required each year to present to the Board of County Commissioners our annual report on what we spent, what we collected in impact fee funding, and then also what we spent it on. In 2019, a little more than $1.7 million in traffic impact fees were collected to help fund transportation improvements. Public Works used $729,000 to support 4 projects and included $250,000 in funding to reimburse projects that were eligible and already completed. The 4 projects include the intersection at Old Highway 99 and Tilley Road, the intersection of US 12 and Sargent Road, and intersection of Johnson Point and Hawks Prairie Road, as well as the intersection of Yelm Highway and Meridian Road. And what we're going to see is, if you look on this slide, you see that we got a fund balance of $7 million. And that's strategic on the part of Public Works. The reason is because we got several major projects that are coming up that are going to require a lot of traffic impact fees. One of the major projects that we're using impact fees is the big project on Mullen Road right now. That's going to take a significant amount of impact fees. The other one is what I was talking about earlier on Marvin Road. We're going to have to use a lot of impact fee in order for the county to meet the criteria of the Growth Management Act. So at that point, that concludes the presentation. Is there any questions about the annual transportation impact fee report?
Yes.
Gary? Yeah. You don't, Gary?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Aren't we up against some kind of a time frame on the expenditure of those funds?
What 10 years? I think for the reimbursement, it's 10 years. Daniel, do you want to?
Yeah, so you do have to spend them within 10 years. So kind of since you've started in 2013, you kind of have 10 years to do that through 2013. If you do not spend those, then you do legally have to refund those with interest to the developers. But it looks like, just rough back of the napkin calculation, it looks like you might be good if you were to not spend anything more until about 2015. But then kind of as you go, as you're spending that money, you'll quickly catch up with your fund balance, I think.
Okay, so that's all I want to know. You don't have to send any back. That's the main thing.
We're not giving it back.
We need a decision. I'm sorry, we need a decision on this, though.
12%.
Because it's got to be included in the comp plan, doesn't it?
This does not get included in the comp plan.
Does not? Okay.
No.
All right. Ty, any questions? Nope. Okay. There you go, Jennifer. It's yours again.
I forgot actually what I was going to say.
Sorry. Boy, it's like at home. All right. Romero, do you want to wrap it up?
Is Scott Lindblom, are you wrapping it up for us or no?
Someone?
I certainly can. So at this point of the presentation, we are looking for direction on how you would like us to proceed on the impact fees. Again, the three options are to continue with the current methodology of using a 50% reduction in the rates, or I guess it was the first option presented was to move ahead, increase the rates to the maximum legally defensible rate. And then the third option, as you certainly have, is to have staff go back and come back with a different set of rates or a different criteria in which you'd like us to advance these projects. The other report that Matt just provided was just a report to you as required by code, and there is no follow-up needed.
That was a good question, though, that Commissioner Mensert asked. That if projects are driving the fees, then how are we scrutinizing our projects? Can we get more next time? Can we get a little more information on that?
Yes, we certainly can.
Just to be clear, that's more information on our project lists.
Okay. Because obviously you can either make it more realistic or stack the deck. I can't imagine a roundabout out there in the Northwest where he lives. Okay, thank you.
Hey,
All right.
Scott.
Yes.
So when I look at our briefing document and we have the next steps, we're talking about the recommended rates being adopted as a part of the comprehensive plan update for 2020.
Yes, correct. So these would be wrapped into that.
Okay, just want to make sure that that's
Yeah, good clarification. Thank you.
Also,
So I'm confused. When are we deciding this issue?
No,
Right now or?
no.
no,
Okay.
I'm waiting for someone to let us know what. Go ahead, Romero. You have it.
No, you're not making a decision today, commissioners. So we'll
when
bring this
can we
item
expect this?
And we need to clarify, I'll clarify with the staff what is meant with the comp plan update this year. Because as far as I know, there's many updates in the comp plan. The board just approved the scope of work, the docket. And as far as I understand, there is nothing online to update parts of the comp plan this year, unless I'm missing something. So we need to circle back on that as to what the department is looking for in terms of the comp plan amendment. Perhaps is the capital facilities plan might be what you're talking about, but we'll circle back. And in terms of the traffic impact fees, what I'm hearing is there's an additional briefing needed. And the additional briefing needed will be concentrated as to how those projects were identified. I guess not necessarily related to the scope of work of those projects, but how the model the TRPC has provided in terms of the projections of the land use based on the and the potential growth that each of those areas will have, and that how that translates to identifying the specific projects. That might be a good briefing to follow up.
Good, and thank you for that clarification. That's what threw me on the comp plan, it being included.
right.
So, okay. So thank you. Then we'll circle back when we're told to come back.
Perfect. Well, and we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to hear both of the parks and traffic impact fees together, so you have some context and not operating in a silo, even though they're different, but they have an impact on the community. And so I think it's important to make sure that there's context there. So we will when we follow up, we'll do the same as well.
Perfect. I'm looking around the screen. Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Ty.
Just one last thing. I mean, I guess can defer this to the next briefing, but I kind of got a sense, is just listening to the comments of the staff. I kind of got a sense that there was interest in having us update the parks impact fee, and I'm kind of getting a sense that maybe staff is comfortable with the level we're at on traffic impact fee. I guess I'd be curious about, we've had, looks like about 6 years of experience. We collected 8.8 million. We haven't spent it all, but we've got projects right now lined up. And so I'd just be curious, like, do we feel we're kind of at the right level to meet the growth that, at least over this 6 or 7 year period, does it feel like we're in about the right spot? Or if I don't want to fall woefully inadequate in terms of meeting our needs, so I guess just if there's a perspective on how the amount we've collected so far is tracking our needs, that helps me know, if that's what we should do for the future. So I just throw that out there as something I'd be interested in hearing people's opinion or perspective on.
Okay. Gary, anything final?
No, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, I think we are done then. Thank you, consultants, for joining us. Daniel and Kendra, thank you very much. Thank you, staff, and thank you, Romero. Thank you, Jennifer. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.